Welcome to Mindshifters Radio. Today's Wednesday, January the 21st, 2026. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Delighted, once again, honored that you're here. And I see that Miss Joan has her microphone open, so maybe she has a thought to kick the show off with. Joan, do you have something to share with us?
Well, I have a question I'd like some clarification on.
I'll do my best.
When Susan was doing being the mother on Sunday, she
Right.
Said several times I'm not sure I'm remembering this correctly.
Okay.
The flow of love should, or protection or safety, I'm not sure what, should always,
Yeah, she was speaking of...
always come from the parent to the child.
Right.
And I'd like you to say more about that, because I've always thought what's needed comes from where it's available to who needs it.
Yes. And if you remember, I stepped in with a modification of that thought, and that was that responsibility is of the adult in an adult-child relationship. It's not, and that since the child and the adult are both made of the stuff called love, then love is going to flow in both directions, would be my offer.
Right.
So we shifted the language from love should flow, the responsibility flows from the adult to the child. And that when an adult, which unfortunately, many kids have to grow up much too quickly because their parent needs a parent. And so the child ends up being the parent at, 6, 7, 8 years of age, taking care of the adult, reversing the roles. But it's the responsibility, it would be the language I think we'd want to go for in that.
Well,
case.
I think what really tripped me up was Susan, I could very well have misheard you. Always, and depending on the age of the child, I don't understand that.
Yeah, and so, and Michael corrected it. So in my other teachings in attachment theory with Dr. Gordon Neufeld and also family constellation, they use different language, but Michael helped to bring that into truth, that the responsibility for parenting always flows, the responsibility of a parent to care for the child. That's where the responsibility lies always.
Regardless of the ages.
Well, and as we age, so this is the difference. So like, for example, I have friends right now that are in my age group, and they're now providing care to their parents.
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, so providing care is one thing. So, but the parent is always the parent. The parent always.
But the responsibility, this is the way I was brought up, and I think Michael and Jeannie modeled it for us with her father. If my parent needs something, it's my responsibility to provide that if I'm able.
You're providing care to the parent. You get to be so this is interesting. So I want to tease apart the energy. So a parent to a child's relationship. Your parents, my parents will always be my parents, no matter what, right? They gave birth to me energetically. The responsibility of parent to child will always be that. Now, as parents age, as time happens, the children steps up to provide care, provide care to the parent as they go through their transition, and many of them are suffering physical ills and they need support or mental decline. But they don't take the role of the parent. They take the role of providing care to the parent. And so we still look for ways to lean into the parent. Even when they're in decline, you may ask them for recipes. So the energetic role still maintains the same. But many of us... Go ahead.
I'd offer there's a
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can clear it up with a change of the understanding of one word in the sentence, and that is that the adult who's taking care of the aging parent is not a child. We're talking about an adult or a parent-child relationship.
Right.
Once
I'm
this
actually
child,
talking both.
what
I'm
I
talking
mean,
both. I'm talking whether like my mom was in her 80s, I was in my 40s. I'm talking about the parent-child relationship, the energetic dynamic between the one who birthed the being called the child, and then there's the parent. There will always be an energetic role that the parent links to the child. If you looked at it as a tree in file folders, or you were, you know, what's coming to mind, I gotta sit with this energy. This is very important, and I know the energy of it, but I don't have the language to express it. When you're developing a tree of any kind, if you do a tree in computer systems, you have a fire folder, and then you have the children of the tree. So let's say that, and this is really important energetically, it always holds its position. If in a computer file system, if I create a file folder called the Fluic, that's my last name, okay? The positions of that file folder will be that my parents will be the parents in that tree. Now the children of that tree will be, in my case, Susan is linked to the parent of that tree. Does that make sense to you, you guys?
Of course.
Okay, so that never changes.
The link.
That link never changes to parent to child. That never, so now the child, let's say in reality, the child is coming in to care for the parent. But the rule never changes.
It's my responsibility.
Well, not necessarily. You may hold it as a responsibility, and you were taught that it's a responsibility, that now that you are to be the provider of care for your parents, that's a belief you hold. But not everybody has that belief that it's their responsibility to care for the parent. And that's not always the case. So if, for example, if the parent didn't provide care to the child the whole life, and for whatever reason, that doesn't necessarily have to fall into responsibility. That's dependent on whatever the soul agreement was and the relationship between the parent and the child. But the functions of who they are never changes.
Yeah, in some cultures,
yeah,
it goes to the extreme. Like, for instance, in the Judaic culture, a man or a woman born of a set of parents, it's if the parents are aging, it's their responsibility to take care of them until they die, and their responsibility to bury them. Yeah. That's part of that culture. So I think there's a cultural thing there. But I think, again, if we clear up the language, that because I am my parent's child does not mean I'm a child. So the child grows up and becomes an adult. So there's kind of a dual meaning for that word.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about a parent and a child, the parent would always be the responsible party in caring for the child when they're a child.
Yeah.
And then we still apply the word child when that child grows up and becomes an adult. So the parent-child relationship still exists, but the adult is not a child anymore. I think, to me, that's where that gets cleared up.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for me, it's energy, the placeholder, where how the energy flows. And for what I don't even, it's even asking this question, Joan, it's still not clear in my own mind, but I know the truth of it. And many people, so when we were doing the exercise the other day.
It doesn't mean anything to me when you say the energy flows. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so, okay, so, well, that's what.
Here's an example.
I can describe it right now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's imagine, Joan, that you walk into a room where your children are, your adult children, which is kind of an oxymoron to even say, but that's the awkwardness of our language.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the respect and the honor due to a parent is going to be in that room, because I think that's what Susan's talking about, is you're always going to be in the parent role. So mom comes in and everybody turns to mom and goes, oh, mom. And mom is the honored energy in the room. That honor flows from the children to mom. And mom embraces her children. You know, if you think of you walking in a room, let's say there are 100 people in the room and there are two of your children, there's going to be a different energy that flows from you, mom, Joan, to your children than anybody else in the room. And I think that's what Susan's talking about. There's a parental energy, and you represent that parental role and that parental energy. And just, you know, the fact that your eyes look at your children, there's an energy there. There's a light that comes in. And my take would be that it would be a different light that would flow from you to your children than to me being in the room. Is that
Yes.
get the distinction?
Yes.
And then, so
you.
the person who was once the little child becomes an adult, and you know, and it might be that the parent has taken advantage of the child, and you know, by the age of 8, this little girl or this little boy was taking care of their mother, and that was, you know, a loss and a burden, which that child would ultimately, in order to have a clear field, have to work through. And they might reach the age of maturity and adulthood where they've tapped into an instruction that was given in the commandments that said, honor thy father and thy mother. They may tap into that and utilize the true understanding of that commandment to heal themselves and to literally step into a healed state of being where they carry such abundance and generosity toward that abusive parent that all of that can be healed and undone. You know, when you hear Yeshua, they ask him the question, you know, what's most important? And the way I hear that question, what they're asking him is, at this particular time, is what's most important in being a human being? And he says, have Rahma. When you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor. And neighbor in Aramaic means anybody that you think about. So what Yeshua is saying is, if there are 7.5 billion people in the world, it is your obligation, if you think of any one of them, to hold Rahma toward them. And that's it. You don't have to speak to them. You don't have to do a behavior. It's your obligation in order to maintain your own human life to hold that state of Rahma. If you close that gateway with hostility or fear, then you've lost your human life by having hostility or fear toward anyone. And then in this particular commandment, this one that says, honor thy father and thy mother, there's a different standard for just 2 people on the whole planet. You know, if there are 7.5 billion people, there are only 2 you need to understand this directive for. And it's a directive that was given to us for our own good and our own healing. It's got nothing to do with the parents, in effect. So it would be urgently important for me to understand and apply that commandment, quote unquote, if my parents were the most abusive parents on the planet, because my physiology and my mind are filled with abuse and unconscious power person dynamics and who knows what, hate, fear, grief, rage, sadness, terror, trauma, who knows what's there. And in Aramaic, the word honor would be, you'd first have Rahma active, and then you would act from love, delivering action toward that parent from a space of love. Now, of course, that seems like, wow, I have all this abuse that's happened from them and I'm supposed to love them? No, I didn't say love them. Nobody ever says in the scriptures, love your neighbor, love your parents, or anybody else. The whole objective, and this has been a degradation in the language that's happened when it came from the Aramaic to the Greek to the Old English, you know, to Latin. They just destroyed this idea. But that directive is about, love is about maintaining your human life. Be a human being, function as a human being. And it's saying, you know, in the one that says, have Rahma for the greater neighbor, it's saying, here's how you maintain your human life, it's irrelevant what they've done. But then if you've got a power person, i.e. there are only two of them for most people, that's their parents, then you want to stand in Ragma and then deliver behavior toward them from that space of love. When that happens, and this is why it's self-interest, when one delivers behavior toward their power person from the state of love, then love moves through the injury dynamics within their own physiology and their own minds, and they get to heal. So he's giving them another tool in that commandment. We're given another tool with which to heal ourselves. Most injuries, I'd offer, and you've heard me say it many times, that the singular dynamic that is responsible for more terror, trauma, starvation, murder, hatred, vengeance, divorce, and abuse is the power person dynamic. It's so urgent to heal. And so many people in that power person dynamic comes up, lose their human lives to that dynamic, and that's when they step into blame and they got all kinds of stories. Even though they're in horrible physical pain, they've got all kinds of stories about how somebody outside of them is the problem. So if I have an abusive parent and I have an unhealed power person dynamic in me, and I follow the command, honor, bring behavior from love through your physiology to your parent, I get to heal.
And you may have noticed if you watch the video, and so just want for me to go back to when I'm referring to energy, everything's frequency and it's a felt sense. So if I asked you, even I did this with Carrie a few weeks ago now, when I just had her experience the felt sense. When we say, even we could all do this now, sitting in, when we just sit in our own bodies and I say the word hate. And you can just close your eyes and just be in the experience. And what is the felt sense when you hear that word? And then I could go to the felt sense of the word love. It feels different. So let's just stay with hate for a minute. Feel how that feels on your physiology in the felt sense.
Breathe.
And it might feel as though it's a constriction or restriction. It may feel like a tension. Everybody will be different how their physiology experiences, and hate would be a discordant energy. It's a disintegrative energy. And then I want to erase that, and that we have a whiteboard, and we are in our physiology. We're in a field of energy. It's all around us. It interchanges through us, around us, in us. And now I want to have the felt sense of the experience of love. And in order to find that as a felt sense, bring something into your field that you love deeply, that you hold and embrace in your love. Maybe your children, your pet, something, it could be a thing, just what you and feel the felt sense of that coming into your field.
And notice what happens with your breath.
Yeah. Just feel that. And what I was wanting to get at when I was speaking about, and you would have noticed on the call when we did the interdependency work and we were doing the cleaning, I'm going to say that, where the constriction of energy in that case, all of us in the room, and I believe on the call as well, the relationship and responsibility for that parent holds for child was inverted. The children end up being responsible for the parent at a very young age. And the energy in the room as I was doing the work was very dense and very constricted. And we wanted to break that free so love within us, between us, could flow in its natural channel and there was no constriction. And when you watched that, you may have seen that, and you heard, for example, in one part there where Andrea felt blame or blamed, that energy was in the field. The relational area, the room that we're in, that's what I mean by the field. Anytime you come together with someone, even in this setting, we've created a relational field. every one of us has brought our essence and our energy to this grouping. So this is a collective field. We take that everywhere. And in that setting, there were all kinds of energies flowing. And you can tell by the energy that's flowing based on the words that people use. You can tell the frequency of the language they use. You can go into a room where it's really hostile. You can walk in the room and it feels dense. And energy, by the way, it entrains to the most dominant energy in the room. And we get to bring our light into these spaces. We don't even have to say a word. You can just hold a beautiful presence. And when love is flowing from parent to child, that's the natural flow of energy. And it doesn't matter the position, but the energy flows, and that opens where it's in the true state where there's no restriction. Now, because it was inverted, there's constriction or Satan energy, if you want to call it that. Love is not flowing in its natural state that it was meant to flow. That's what we were wanting to clean up. And then we're also going to continue the journey tonight because, and also we take on the patterns and the behaviors of our parents. And in Andrea's case, it was not flowing, and you could see how it's constricted, and she was replicating her power person and not being able to rest in the true divine mother or the great mother, and how parents are to show up when they're parenting the younger children. And she's replicating this pattern as an adult to her adult children. Does that make sense to you, Joan?
It does to a degree, but I think we've all known children who had the capacity for uncommon love. And if that child, for whatever reason we don't understand, is capable of caring for that very sick parent, alcoholic or whatever, I don't see what's abnormal about that flow.
Yeah,
it's
the
unusual,
love. Yeah.
But I don't think it's unnatural.
Yeah. So you said
my offering.
It doesn't.
Yeah, you said a key
my
word.
offering there, Joan.
Yeah.
Let me throw something in.
Yeah.
My offering there, Joan, is while that child may have some capacity for it, my offering would be that it's out of harmony with
Nature.
That child's life force. That for the child who's supposed to be with friends and playing and growing and learning and having experiences as a child, that is forced in, even if they have the capacity to play the adult role, they've missed out. And I hesitate to offer the word unfair, but I think that's probably the word. It's unfair to call a child out of a circumstance that gives them what at their age they are designed to be experiencing, to call them out of that, to deprive them of that, and expect them to play a role that the child should not have to play. Now, that doesn't mean that if it has to happen, it has to happen, and you can't make you can make the best of it. But my take is to invite the child with the greatest capacity, who's 8 years of age, to be the parent to an alcoholic father or mother is unfair and out of harmony with truth. That would be my take. And
also, you used the word, a very important word, Joan. You said capable when you describe the child. And if you look at the roots of attachment and how the psyche develops, a child's may have a maladaptive strategy that they would have had to do that, but they are not resourced in development in order to do that. But they may have been forced, as Michael said. And it's actually, I believe, for me, it's unjust, because the developmental age of a mind to be able to have to take on responsibility of an adult mind, they don't have the capacity for that. And that ends up, I want to say, restricting their capacity to develop naturally. And then they end up being restricted, and then that ends up materializing as an adult in certain behavior patterns because they didn't get to develop all of their capacity, because they, in some cases, Michael said, were forced to take on responsibility that they are not equipped to take on. And then we end up having survival strategies and patternings that we do as adults, but that is not nature's way. If I put you in a setting where a child could develop in its natural state and all the conditions were conducive for his or her development, compared to a child that's brought up in alcoholism, where they have to be responsible for the parent to get their needs met, their level of maturity and how they show up is completely different than someone that was allowed to mature naturally in the way of nature. And I would say to Michael, I also believe that's unjust.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
Unfair, unjust.
Yeah.
Let me give a backstory that might help fill in the blanks here, and I'd love anybody else's thoughts to pop in here. What's moving for everybody? Back when I was still in Fort Lauderdale, I started to develop a program that I called matrix therapy. Unfortunately, life shifted and changed, and I started to go on the road and travel nationally and internationally, and that kind of got left behind. But here is the basic thesis of it. Let's imagine we have a seed and we put it in the garden, and the soil is fresh and whole, has all the microorganisms that it needs, has all the minerals, has all the nutrients that it needs, the sunshine's perfect, there's water. And with all of that perfection around it, that plant is going to grow, and the flower will develop into a mature adult flower perfectly as it's designed to do. However, if at the planting of that seed, I go into that soil and I destroy just one nutrient in that soil, then as that plant grows, in some way, shape, or form, it's going to be deformed. It is not going to grow fully into and mature into what it was designed to be, because that's missing. That's the foundation of matrix therapy, which I've been working toward getting back to finishing off that program. So here's the analogy, or here's how I would take that understanding now and bring it into the human realm. My take is, and Jeannie and I have asked tens of thousands of people all over the globe to go back to the moment where they first held a newborn, tap into the essence of the newborn, and name that essence. And virtually everyone's answer, it doesn't matter where in the world. I did this in China. We did it in, Sweden. We've done it all over the world. And everybody's answer is always some variation on the theme of love. That's where we talk about being as love, and it's a noun. It's the state of functioning as who we are. It's not something we do. And my offering is that state of being is like the flower. We come into a tiny body, a child's body, an infant, as a being. And my offering is that the birthright of the child, if our world were functioning as I believe the Creator designed it to function, that child would come in, and throughout the pregnancy, as that mother carried that child, that mother would be functioning as the being she is, as love, so that growing fetus would be marinating in the presence of active love and fed with that nutrient. The father functioning as the active presence of love offers the child that nutrient, that energy, that unique energy that he is. Mom has offered hers. These I offer are nutrients to strengthen and grow the being the child into love. At birth, ideally, there would be a gentle, warm environment. We wouldn't be putting the mother in a totally and completely unnatural condition to give birth, so that it's convenient for the doctor. We wouldn't be bringing a child into a room. The child in utero has had nothing but the very dim light coming through the mother's belly of maybe this slightly red visual that might come through the child's eyes, and has been in an environment for 9 months that's just a little bit warmer than 98.6 degrees. We wouldn't be taking a hold of that child by the ankles and dragging into a room where the temperature just dropped by 40 degrees, where there's a bright, shining light going right into the child's eyes, blinding light when you think of the child's never seen anything but this dull red color, perhaps, through the mother's belly. And then is everybody breathing, by the way? What's happening with your breath as I'm saying this? Then grabbing that child by the ankles. Now, the tissue in the ankles of a child coming out of the womb, I would offer, is probably, never having been touched, is probably about as sensitive as perhaps a third-degree burn. The doctor takes the child by the ankles, hangs them upside down. Now, the spine of this child has never been straightened before. It's grown up in an environment where its spine is curved. It's been in this tight little space. Now, think about yourself. If you lay in a position for just 10 minutes, let's imagine you rest your hand on your wrist and the wrist on, or the elbow on the table for 10 minutes, and then you take your hand away. And what do you have to do? Oh, man, to get that wrist to straighten out. This child's spine has been bent in a curve for 9 months, or, since it got big enough to start to fill the space, several months. And all of a sudden, that child's spine is snapped straight by holding it up by the ankles. And then somebody slaps it. That child's not getting the nutrients it needs in its birth. That first person that child met, if it was a doctor, in the ideal world would have met someone who is in a state of connected love, providing the nutrient of love unique to that doctor, that nurse, that midwife, that spouse. I was fortunate to catch both of my own children at home and be that space with them. And my take is that coming into the world, each person we meet is like a nutrient in the soil. The neighbor, the aunt, the uncle, the cousin, the grandparents, if each were functioning as the space of conscious, active, pleasant love, then that child, and throughout its life, its young life, its impressionable life, its growing brain, its growing structure, everyone it met, ideally being the space of active, present love, would be a nutrient, and that child would just naturally flower into the most awesome being possible, fulfilling their full potential without strain or effort. And so the child at 8, though, and I agree with you, that there is a child who perhaps is capable of taking care of that alcoholic parent. But as Susan said, unjust, unfair would be my take. And, are we in a world that's so crazy that sometimes circumstances mean we have to do things that are out of harmony with what the ideal is? Yeah, unfortunately. And the objective here is, if we've been subject to any of that, to forgive, to let those energetic patterns go. And then the next step in the matrix therapy idea is that because the mind can't tell the difference, physiology can't tell the difference between a real and imagined experience, if the frequency's there, the frequency is there, then the idea of matrix therapy was to take people back through the imaginative faculty, break that word down, image in, the ability to bring in, to tap into being steeped in the presence of mother's presence as love, being steeped in father's presence as love, being steeped in grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, neighbor, milk delivery man, whoever, and that each one would strengthen that presence and the flowering of that individual. And to me, ultimately, that's kind of the objective of this work, is to bring this to a world where we can actually give that to every child that comes into the world. So does that fit with your questioning, Joan? Does that help fill it out and or leave you with any other thoughts?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
I have two thoughts.
Please, sweetheart, go.
Okay, one is I looked up children of alcoholic parents, and I'll put a link in the chat, but it says that a child, especially if they've had to be they called it a parentified child. And it's one who has to take on the parenting role of maybe themselves, other siblings, and possibly the parent themselves, that they have studied, and they can suffer from a wide range of negative academic and cognitive effects, which include low grade point average, grade retention or failure of grades, failure to pursue secondary education, poor performance in math, reading, and spelling, unexcused absences and truancy, impaired learning capability, poor speech and language development in the first 3 years of life. And it says the mental effect on those children includes anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, social phobia, separation anxiety, obsessive compulsive issues, lower rates of social competence, delinquent and antisocial behavior, aggression towards others, suicidal thoughts or behaviors, emotional isolation, eating disorders, behavior disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and it just goes on and on. It does have a definite impact physically and mentally, emotionally. And then I had another thought.
And that would be, before you go on to the other thought, Jeannie, that would be the equivalent of the flower in the ground having a nutrient removed and compromising the full development of the flower throughout its whole life and becoming what it's designed to be.
Exactly. The other thought is what came to mind when we were talking about, and Sally, I did just put that link in, is that when Dad, we moved to here in 2018 to care for him because he had developed Parkinson's and dementia. And even when he got to the point where, he couldn't do anything for himself except feed himself, he couldn't roll over, he couldn't sit up or anything. And we would go to visit him, every other day at least. This was when we had to put him in a assisted living because it took 2 people just to take care of him. And even when we would go see him and he was like a child, I still respected him and honored him as my father. So he still held the parent role.
Breathing with you, sweetheart.
Thank you, Janie, so much for that. Thank you.
And breathing with every parent who's ever found themselves incapable of being the parent that we're designed to be. I think about the things I know now and the things I'm able to do with Lincoln and Aria. I wish I'd known them when I was a dad with my kids at their age. I didn't. And so there's been forgiveness work I've had to do around that. And to just hold the space for every parent that's ever, there's an old saying, the child is father to the man. And if you look at the child abused, misused, then the man is going to in some way be deformed. And, the whole objective here is to bring correction. And it tends to be cyclical and it tends to be generational. And so we hold the space for every generation, and each generation becomes cause to the next generation, effect to the next generation cause. And to unwind that cycle is the whole idea of doing the power person work. And that's why that worksheet, is up to Well, it's heading for 21 pages. There's still some edits that I'm working on, but it's a deep piece of work to say I'm going to look at everything in me. I'm going to take responsibility for everything in me that produces any expression other than the state of being that I am as love, coming through, seeping through, radiating through, extending through every cell in my structure, in every circumstance in my life. That's what we want to empower the process of healing, the depth of understanding of healing, to make that a possibility for all 7.5 billion people on the planet, which will mean the eradication of starvation and child abuse and elder abuse and parental or spousal abuse and starvation, poverty. I mean, the whole game is going to change. And where's it going to start? It has to start with me. And that's why we're not suggesting to anyone we've got any particular truth to offer. What we have is tools. Please take the tools, use them, model them, extend them until we can hit the point in our development as humans of the predominant resonant energy that fuels each person's system in a critical mass of people is that of love. And when that occurs, there will be a field developed, literally recognize that energy is motion. Everything that moves creates a wave. If I throw a pebble in a pond, waves move out. That's the energy of that, the impact of that pebble. If I throw a word out into the world, that's an energy. It creates waves. And when Yeshua, the physicist, said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, he wasn't talking about bread. He was talking about we as human beings, that when enough of us will do the work of cleaning up what, you look at the prescription that he gave to one particular group of disciples, and we don't know exactly how many of them, in response when it was assigned, were so locked into their trauma and their blame game that they said, literally, check it out, too hard a saying, who can hear it? And then it says, and they walked with him no more. They left. They created an excuse. They had a whole big blame game to play. See, you made this too hard for me, and we're out of here. And they left. And the objective, that we have here is to do a depth of work that we can each be the space where we can embrace anything in ourselves that's unlike love, process through it. And, I'll be the first person to put my hand up and say, I don't know anybody who's made it there yet fully. But I can say for myself that if I think back 60 years ago, there's no comparison. And hopefully, as each person contacts this work, a year out, 2 years out, 5 years out, 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 years from now, that the world will say, the frequency's changed, the field has changed, and more capable of embracing and carrying the frequency of active present love in thought, word, action, and appearance. So I hope that fits for everybody, makes sense. That's what we're here to do. Every mind, heart, and being on the planet. Thoughts, questions, answers, ideas? Anyone have anything to share? Well, then, in that case.
We used to call it vibes, Michael.
Vibes. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, let's go back to the 60s.
Yeah, heavy
Good vibes. That's
There's
it.
heavy vibes here, man.
Hopefully healing vibes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the kids, they that was it exactly. It was all vibration. It's all.
And that's when I think we started really languaging that we were sensing the energy around us, the energy field of, because the energy field is like you walk into a room and you can feel sometimes what's going on. Like you can
Exactly.
feel like accept, you walk into your church group or something and you feel acceptance and love. Or like my sister walked into a new senior center to try and, join a community of women, and she was rebuffed and she felt the vibes, man.
Mm,
In the room, it was all clicky, and she said, "Oh, can I join you at your table?" And they were like, "No."
wow.
Yeah. She felt the vibes. And then she joined this other senior center in her town, and she said, "Oh, it was just really sweet and nice and lovely." So,
Thank you for that. Right on. Anybody else have a comment to throw in before I assign an exercise? Okay, well, yesterday, I think it was, or maybe it was the day before, I put a copy of a worksheet in the chat and asked everybody to copy it. And or if you didn't copy that, I'll just invite you to create your own worksheet, or you can go to the website and Jeannie, while I'm chatting, do you think you could put a link in the chat to the 3 early memories exercise? And I'm going to describe that exercise and invite everybody to work with it, unless somebody has a thought to share based on where our conversation was. If there's anything else to look at or think about or question or comment on or process around. So I'm going to ask you to take a blank piece of paper and divide the page into 3 parts. Up at the top of the page, put a 1. About a third of the way down the page, put a 2. And about 2/3 of the way down the page, put a 3. So you've got a page divided into 3 sections. And you don't need to fill in the early memory right now, but basically what I'm going to ask you to do is go back to the earliest memories of conflict that you have and just take the first 3 of them that come to awareness, and very briefly write them in. We're not going to ask you to write them in now because we've only got a few minutes. I want to give the instructions for the exercise. But memory 1, memory 2, memory 3, and an early memory of conflict is anything, not my definition of a conflict, anything you define as a conflict. It might be something where you were standing back watching a conflict unfold. It might have been a conflict with yourself inside your own mind. It might have been a conflict in which you were directly involved. It doesn't matter. No concern whatsoever. Just very briefly, 1, 2, and 3. Memory 1, 2, and 3 of conflict. And then what we're going to ask you to do once you've filled in those 3 early memories is I'm going to ask you to fill in a set of blanks for each memory. And here are the blanks. So under number 1, I'm going to ask you to write life is. Beneath that, write people are. Beneath that, write I am. Beneath that, write I feel. Beneath that, I want. So each of these is on a line, and beneath that, I need. So life is, I am, I feel, people are. Relationships are, I must, I want, I need. They're the 8 lines that go beneath. I think I missed one or two of them when I was listing them out. But life is, I am, I feel. People are. Relationships are. I must, I want, I need. So if you would write those 8 lines below memory 1, and then repeat it, memory 2, memory 3. So they're the blanks. So you can now have a set of blanks for each memory. And I'm going to invite you to go back to each of those memories of conflict. And from the point of view of the best you can recall each of those blanks, what the meaning is in it. So, you know, the first memory might be something like, oh, I can remember one day I had a fight with my friend and we separated. That might be conflict memory 1. So based on that memory, knowing yourself, and, you know, if you've got direct recall of what each blank is, great. If not, then knowing yourself, make it up. I am, as a result of that memory, I am. It might be, I'm sad. I feel sadness. Life is a challenge. People, you know, maybe I came to the conclusion that this friend was nasty. People are nasty. People are. I must. Maybe the I must might be, I must be on guard, or I must stay away from relationships, or I must not get too deeply involved, or whatever your I must would be. I want. Gee, I want people to be there with me. I need. Well, you know, I went home in tears as a result of that, and went to my dad and asked for support and healing. So it might be, the need might be, I need someone to support me in healing. Or maybe I need someone to protect me. Or maybe, you know, my friend was a bully and I need someone to stand up for me. So whatever that need, that developed the thought around need. I want friendships to go easily. I must. Maybe the must is, I must be easier to get along with, or I must be tougher, or, you know, whatever the conclusion are. And I want, what do I want? It's a goal I formed out of that situation. And so what we're going to ask you to do for tomorrow's show is to fill in a set of those blanks for each of those 3 early memories. Does that make sense for everybody? And or does anybody have a question?
Skipped relationships are, and I want to pay.
Oh, okay. Were you able to find the link for the notes?
It's in there, and I also put the list.
Oh, cool. Oh, there you go. So you can just copy that. And there's the link to it. Thank you, sweetie. So does that do those instructions make sense to everybody? And does anybody have any questions? Anything to share about what thinking about the exercise brings up for you? Everybody's so quiet today. Nobody's going to say a word? All that work, and I don't elicit
I just said it.
anybody.
I'm saying it, a word.
Okay,
That's amazing. No,
cool.
listen, I know we've done this exercise, at both your intensives, and yeah, it's so powerful because what I love is, when you're going through the healing crisis, those exact patterns are going to arise, those feelings, and it's going to show up the same way it went in. So, and just like really holding that, I have this in the front of the file folder of this right there always, because when I go into alarm and the non-being mind is present and I'm feeling completely overwhelmed, I just remember that this is just, it's going out rather than in.
Yay.
So, yeah, very
Cool.
important to do this. So thank you for the reminder, and also just to put it top in mind again. Feels very beneficial.
Cool. And I'll just share the last minute or so that with what Susan had shared with us from the last 2 days and yesterday's processing. And some of you are aware that recently I had a John the Baptist experience too. So I've started a new section, for our mind shifters and still point breathing monthly group. We do a new set of 13 mind shifters per month. So I'm doing a set of 13 mind shifters around healing issues around the John the Baptist syndrome. And if you haven't been on a show where I've talked about that, you remember John the Baptist was essentially called the raving maniac in the desert. He was a wild man who wore camel hair and, leather belt and ate locusts and honey. He was pretty outrageous. He was outside the standard culture. And my offering is that what they were saying there is that he knew how to reach into people's, the desert is a code word for the unconscious. He knew how to reach into people's unconscious. And and he was also called the forerunner of the Christ. Before the Christ can awaken in any one of us, we're going to have to meet somebody who can reach into our unconscious and show us what's there. If we have an unconscious, we have an unconscious because we're in blockage of truth. When one is in blockage of truth and truth is delivered, the stress goes up. If one remains in denial when their stress goes up, they will hallucinate out of their own dissociated content and use that content, massage it into images of whoever they're currently blaming, whoever they're talking about as being the source of their, not feeling safe or not being respected or, not being taken care of, whatever the dynamic is. They'll make up stories about the object of attention of that. And so you'll remember with John the Baptist, he told the king and queen that, you guys are doing adultery here. And by the way, king, this is your niece you're marrying. You can't do this. Is like how. So they were in blockage of truth. Their stress went up. And what did they do? They took off his head. And so I always offered that there were two skills, and I suggest to you, if you're going to play the role of John the Baptist, which is you're delivering truth to people who are in blockage of truth, you are going to get to play the John the Baptist role, which, as Susan was sharing. And I recently had the experience of there are two skills that need to be developed, and that is you've got to know when to duck and when to hold the mirror up. So I sent Susan a note this morning saying that I had created this mind shifter just for her and I. And so the mind shifter, if you've ever found yourself playing John the Baptist, somebody wants to take off your head because they're not willing to be responsible for what's going on inside themselves. Their bodies are yelling and screaming and raging in pain and trauma and, crushing migraine headaches and things like that. But they're going to talk about you. That's the John the Baptist syndrome. They want to take your head off. So here's the mind shifter that I offered. This is going to be the first one. And then Susan came back with a bunch of them. Thank you. So if you've ever played that role, here's a mind shifter to work with. I easily breathe and embrace all energies from all time and resolve all conflicts in me around delivering truth where it is actively resisted and attracts attack, blame, or degradation. So if that resonates for you, you might want to grab that mind shifter. It's
Can you
one of the
post
things
it in the chat? I couldn't keep up with you.
I can. Sure. I will post it in the chat right now. I'm copying it. I will go to the chat room. So you might want to play with this one if you've ever played John the Baptist. Yeah, if you remember, Joan, they call John the Baptist the raving maniac. That is, he could go into people's unconscious, their desert. And if we hold any sort of hostility or fear dissociated in our minds and in our physiology, the Christ mind, because of the noise of that, the still small voice, isn't available. So John the Baptist is the one that one had to meet. That was the forerunner of the Christ that would reflect the unconscious dynamics for us. So there it is. So this is section 39 in our mind shifters groupings. I easily breathe and embrace all energies. Excuse me. Excuse me, I just swallowed some water. I easily breathe and embrace all energies from all time and resolve the conflicts in me around delivering truth where it is actively resisted and attracts attack, blame, or degradation. Excuse me, I'm just going to get water in. So anybody who recognize that syndrome, we invite you to use that one. And if you would, do that 3 early memories for tomorrow. And we'll come back and play. Anybody else have a thought before we close out? Anything at all to share? All right.